One of the few games from 2018 that caught my attention was the incredibly overlooked shmup, ZeroRanger. Originally titled Final Boss and built across a decade, this Finnish developed indie title is a love letter to anime, music, film and video games throughout the years. More importantly, it's a fine vertical scrolling shooter that plays just as well as it looks, although still showing some of the limitations of other indie games. Some players have described ZeroRanger as the Undertale of shmups for having an interesting meta storyline, fourth wall breaking tricks, as well as including Buddhist themes and concepts. The narrative is almost totally optional, as there are a few actual story heavy moments. Rather, a lot of information and lore is passed out in the gameplay, and by replaying the game successive times, matching the religious and cultural idea of reincarnation and repetition through life. Going into much more depth would likely ruin some of the most surprising and entertaining portions, but if you understand Hinduism or Buddhism, you'll probably quite enjoy what's offered. Starting up, the game is appropriately old school. You can choose between two crafts that have different weapon spreads, damage per shot, and minor story paths. Once done, you launch into the action of one of 4 stages, filled with hundreds of enemies, mid and end level boss fights, and a bounty of environmental hazards, all while dying in just one hit. You have multiple lives that are gained through scoring points and picking up rare 1-ups. Losing all your lives results in a game over, unless you ever continue, represented as a gem in a sacred lotus flower, cause symbolism. These allow you to continue a level without restarting the whole thing. You gain more continues by accruing experience in combat. Most stages only take 10 minutes, but the challenge will keep you repeating before finally mastering them. Controlling your ship I found very easy playing on a gamepad. I can't recommend a mouse and keyboard. You have 4 different equipment slots and 6 possible weapons to choose between. These are acquired after defeating a boss and each have a satisfying sound and pulse to them. You can replay levels again to pick up the other variants, though this isn't necessary. What I've noticed through using them is that some of the tools are vastly better than others. A late game choice is either an awkward lock-on beam that does minimal damage, or a chargeable area of effect explosion that also protects against projectiles and attacks. Why wouldn't you pick the latter? Enemies are vast, numerous and aggressive, so being able to crowd control and switch armaments on the fly is essential to win. Boss fights themselves require dexterous movements and timing as their attacks practically and literally fill up the screen. ZeroRanger is a challenging game, yet gives enough leeway such as a forgiving hit detection system that allows at least patient and willing players to overcome its adverse encounters. Killing swarms of enemies or triggering some environmental events can spawn golden enemies and even special bosses that net far more points, thus beefing up your life count. Levels are made very replayable in large part due to fantastic pixel art, with objects and enemies breaking apart and exploding in various ways, as well as the amazing soundtrack. It's a beautiful concoction of bass, synth, and keyboard which is simply fucking amazing. Having the narrow, very old school aspect ratio works fine, however the lack of border art just makes it seem a bit unfinished. Besides the gameplay, a lot of the fun of ZeroRanger is picking out the references to other bits of media. Nausicaa, Nier Automata, Undertale, Evangelion, and Gurren Lagann are worthwhile inclusions, especially since it's not blatant, merely a sign of the devs having a lot of fun with their own work. What's less appreciated is the uneven pace and endgame challenge. I don't mind that some deaths come from just the overwhelming deluge of bullets on screen that practically makes avoidance near impossible. What I dislike is that achieving the truest ending without spoiling it will probably force players to replay the same game at least 2 more times. Is what happens a neat idea? As a fan of Nier and Undertale, yes. Problem is that there's still a fair bit of extra content past this challenge. I know a few players who either give up and watch the ending online because successive replays don't differ aside from being shorter purely from the player's skill. Consider where it takes its influence from. This isn't necessarily good game design, as in those titles, this event happens when you've basically discovered all its secrets and want a final challenge. I know this sounds very vague, but if you play ZeroRanger, which I do recommend, this will be a significant hurdle. Otherwise, there's a paltry number of additional unlockables, including different text and visual filters. Some are a nice mix-up, the others... My eyes! My eyes! The devs are planning to add more features and modes, so hopefully there'll be additional meat to this bone, and perhaps might even address the issues highlighted, as the whole game can be finished in about 4 hours. Right now though, as a first game, ZeroRanger is a very competent, wholesome shmup that fans of the genre and even some patient casuals will love digging through.